I'm going to go ahead and re-record one of my videos. This is the one for people who have not saved any money until they turn 50 years old. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of people in this boat. They had difficulties in life, or unanticipated things came up, or they use their retirement money for some other purpose than retirement. Maybe they bought a house with it or a business. I cashed out a retirement account when I opened up a business that I had for 8 years. So it's not really that unusual. Or people lose their jobs and they just need to use their retirement savings to sustain themselves. So this is something that happens a lot. People get to age 50 and they're not in the boat of people who had started saving early, really. They're just starting from zero. So what can be done? These are people who are going to have some difficulty, and just telling them that they should have started earlier is not helpful for folks in this boat. So let's see what can be done. So let me start by creating a column for year, and then we'll start with the current year. Age, because we're saying that this person is 50 years old, we'll say they're 50. Now, salary, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit larger than some of our previous models. We'll make this person at $55,000 a year in salary. Typically, new workers start off with a little bit less than what they're going to make eventually. We want to make these assumptions conservative, but I'll show you later how this can apply to people with all sorts of salaries that are both greater and smaller than this. So salary, and then savings, ROI, which is their return on investment, and their total. All right, so there's some constants we're going to have here. The ROI rate, we're going to say 10% return, and again, you can visit previous videos for where I'm coming up with that number. Let's establish an inflation rate, because this is going to be a real problem for us as we retire. We'll say 2%. Now, also, I'm going to say that this person receives 2% raises per year. So a lot of folks, unfortunately, are not in this boat. They have jobs where they're not getting even raises that keep them up with inflation. But it's a relatively reasonable presumption that people who are in mid-career are going to have some sort of raises, and with any luck, they'll keep them current with inflation. So again, both of these assumptions are conservative. The inflation rate is actually much higher than the recent inflation rate. And the raise rate is probably, lower. I mean, even at age 55, you may be still getting better at your job, and your employer may recognize that and reward you with raises that exceed the rate of inflation. So we've got the ROI rate, the inflation rate, the raise rate. Let's put in a savings rate, 10%. So savings here is going to be our salary times our savings rate. Then ROI, we're going to presume, again, this person has no savings. Conservatively speaking, we'll only apply ROI to previous years. So they have no return on investment because they have no investments. And then their total is just going to be how much money they saved in this year at the end of the year. So the next year, we'll add one to the year. They're 1 year older. And then the salary is going to be previous year's salary times 1 plus the inflation rate. All right, so they're going to get a little tiny raise, a 2% raise. It gets them to $56,000 a year. They've got savings now. It's going to be the same thing. What we want to do is have this as an absolute cell address. So as we copy this down, it will look Wonderbar. Same thing here. This we want to be an absolute cell address. All right, so we can copy it. Return on investment, we're going to say whatever you had at the end of the last year. It's multiplied times our ROI rate, so you made 10% on your money. Then the total here is going to be last year's total plus ROI plus new savings. Boom. All right, so at the end of year 2, this person has $11,000. All right, so let's run this out like we did with previous examples until this person is 67 years old. All right, so 67, and something went really wrong. Let's see, F9 times, I didn't have the absolute cell address there. All right, see if that helps. Okay, so at the end of this person's working life, so we've got 18 years worth of data here to work with. They've accumulated $284,000. That's not even adjusted for inflation at this point. So let me make these numbers a little bit easier to read. And then let me adjust it for inflation. And then let's talk about realistically what they're looking at in terms of retirement. So I don't really care about pennies, so we'll get rid of those. Okay, so again, to adjust for inflation, we put in an inflation adjustment factor that we're going to multiply things by. So it turns out that the math for that is the same as the math for the salary, pretty much. It should be. Didn't work. Let me add some decimal points here. Okay, there we go. All right, so our inflation adjustment factor is 1.4 at the end of this time period. What does that mean? All right, inflation adjusted total. Okay, what this means is that as time goes on, inflation is taking away some of our money. So how much money is it taking away? Well, first year it really doesn't take anything away. We're comparing everything to the year 2016 dollars. But then if we go to the second year and beyond, you can see that instead of $11,600, we have the purchasing power of $11,431. Make these readable. Take away the decimal points. Okay, so this person has the purchasing equivalent of $202,000 when we adjust by inflation. Here's the trouble, is that he can't take out all this money at once. So what realistically is this guy looking at here? Well, he's got $202,000, and a rule of thumb is that you can retire on a 4% withdrawal of your assets, and that the assets are likely to last a long time. So let's say it's this times 0.04. $8,000 a year, the equivalent of 8,000 of today's dollars per year, which is like $600 a month. That's just really not very much money to retire on. I mean, this person's probably going to get Social Security benefits. I'm going to guess maybe they're in the neighborhood of $2,000 a month or so at age 67, but this is really not very good. They are not going to be able to retire on this. So what can be done? All right, so how do we fix this problem? The $202,000 is just not going to cut it. Well, one thing we can do is this person, you know, it's kind of a shame. They're probably going to have to work longer. So let's have them work until they're 70 years old now. At 70 years old, something happens, and what happens is that you're eligible for your maximum Social Security retirement benefit. This is not to be confused with your full Social Security retirement benefit, which happens when you're 67. Because what happens is if you don't start collecting at 67, this check gets a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger until you're 70 years old. Okay, that is the most money you can collect, and it's substantially more. So if this is $2,000, this might be, I don't know, $2,600 or something. It's a big chunk more of money. All right, here's the deal here, though, now. So we've got this to $272,000, but that's still not a lot of money. In fact, it works out to, well, $10,000 a year, $11,000 a year, almost $1,000 a month. We're getting closer. If this person had $24,000 a year in Social Security benefits, or maybe they wait and they file when they're 70 for their Social Security benefits. They did have $2,600. So they have $31,000 here plus $11,000 here. So it'd be like having $42,000. All right, I'm going to say that that's not good for a couple reasons. One is that the inflation adjusted salary we're trying to replace is $55,000 a year. $44,000 a year is a lot less. Okay, so typically advisors tell you maybe you should shoot for about 85% of your pre-retirement income for what you need in retirement. So again, this is just the salary being increased by inflation. So inflation adjusted, it's $55,000 a year. But if you don't believe me, we can do the division by the inflation adjustment factor, and yeah, it's $55,000 on the button. So what we want is something closer to 46,000, and right now we're at 42,000. So, I mean, we're in the ballpark. It's not unreasonable that you could retire with this little bit of shortfall. But is there a way to make it up? Is there a way to do a little bit better than this? Well, let's talk about it here. One thing is that we are still saving we're only saving 10% of our pay. That is a savings rate that's appropriate if you started saving a long time ago when you were much younger. Here, this person's behind the eight ball. They didn't start saving until they were 50. So let's start talking about maybe a 15% there. Okay, so 15%. Now, a couple of things to consider here. Okay, first off, now we've got a lot more money. So that times 0.04. Okay, 16,335, and then they have 55,000 a year. So, I'm sorry. We'll say that their Social Security benefit, because they waited until they're 70, is $2,600 a year. And so, how much money are they getting? Plus, okay, $47,000 a year. Okay, now, two things to consider here. One is that, yeah, now we're actually in the zone where we're replacing 85% of our income. But what's been happening for all these years with our salary? Well, we've been taking 15% of it, and we've been saving it. So we're used to living on only 85% of our salary to begin with. So we're probably not going to be doing retirement savings when we're in retirement. That was the point of the retirement savings. So actually, this person's in really good shape. But there's a few other things to consider here. One is that look at this ROI rate of 10%. That means this person is fully invested still in stocks. So is that really prudent? I mean, that could really be problematic. So let me copy this line into a new spreadsheet. And let's go through some burn rate calculations. Okay, and I'll just insert a header row here. To see, I mean, this is really dangerous, right? Because if the stock market has a terrible year, then we will no longer have sufficient income to be retired. So, how does this really work? Let's see here. Let me go ahead and make these numbers. Okay, and those are good. All right, so this is the day we retire. We have $408,000 saved up. All right, our inflation adjustment factor, let me open this thing up a little bit bigger too. So we want to bring this all back to modern day money. Okay, and actually, what the heck, let's go ahead and insert a few more rows and bring in these constants from here. So we're going to use a lot of these on this spreadsheet as well. Whoops. All right, so ROI rate, I mean, at 10%, that's pretty scary, okay? We are not going to be dealing with the very long time frame that we were dealing with when we were setting up these retirement accounts for very young people. And the stock market is very volatile from year to year, and so that's going to be a problem. All right, but let's go ahead and do some calculations here. We're going to add one to the year because we're going to say this person's going to live a while. Okay, and then copy this, boom. And then salary really doesn't matter anymore. I mean, they don't have a salary anymore. So that's not going to be an issue. And savings. So what we're going to do here is replace these columns with withdrawal and withdrawal rate. Okay, and let's change the ROI rate, and then we'll have ROI. Okay, so this person's probably going to want some sort of investments over time. All right, so how much do we want to withdraw? Well, let's see here. This person was making $81,000 a year when they retired. They're going to pull out $2,600 a month in their Social Security check. Okay, that's equal to $31,200. Okay, so let me put that in here. And we've got $31,000. All right. The Social Security benefit actually gets increased by your cost of living. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the inflation rate there. Social Security is supposed to be increased by the amount of inflation every year. All right, your withdrawal, let's say that we're going to set that equal to your Social Security benefit. Boom. Okay, so what we need to do is replace $31,000 a year in this year. All right, so let's approach this from a few different perspectives. ROI rate, I'm going to leave this at 10% right now, just to keep this simple. And then ROI is still going to be previous, well, say, they are going to get some return this year. Okay, so $60,000 in return. Withdrawal rate, let's leave that alone for now, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a minute. So, with Social Security benefit gets increased by the inflation rate. It didn't like that. Why did you not like that? J8 plus 1 plus B2. And times. Okay, so it got increased by 2% here. I'm going to leave the inflation adjusted total here alone for a sec, but that'll be that. Okay, and all right, so this year's total is going to be last year's total plus return on investment minus withdrawals. Okay, there we go. And so you can see that our inflation adjusted total actually went up a little bit. So I'm going to set this again equal to Social Security benefit. All right, and copy this here, copy you there. We should be able to run this thing out. Let's run this out until this person turns 90 years old. Now, some people live to be a lot older than 90. My blessed, wonderful grandmother lived to be 93 years old. I personally don't think I'm going to live that long. I don't take that good a care of myself, but you can obviously extend this model as long as you'd like to. Maybe just for the sake of discussion, let's extend it to 95. I'm not sure how many of us are going to live to be older than 95, but if you look at this withdrawal rate, which is the equivalent of 62,000 real dollars a year, then this person actually continues to get more and more money, and they actually get a larger result at the end. Okay, so what's the other way we could do this? Is we could say a 4% withdrawal rate. All right, so I'm going to copy that all the way down for a minute. Okay, so that the withdrawal now is going to be 4% of the total. So okay, and it's actually less money than what we were talking about here earlier. So obviously, if it was working before, it'll work now. But 4% is less than the 31,000, but it keeps going up. So withdrawal rate of 4%, I mean, it kind of works here. Okay, but let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's say that instead of in stocks, we invest in bonds, and we've got a 4% rate of return. All right, now we start seeing that by withdrawing 4%, our principal is going down every month. So here where we're withdrawing 4%, let's get out of there for a second. Let's go back to just duplicating what our Social Security benefit is. Okay, if we do that, what happens? Well, we actually use up almost all the money by the time we're 95. This is why people advise that you move to bonds later on in life. This person, even though they really didn't save much, they saved just enough at retirement, and they can kind of slide in here where they just don't have any money at the end. So this is probably where you want to be at retirement. So you just kind of have to judge it for yourself. But the thing is here now, some people they'd like to leave something for their kids. I mean, your kids at this point are going to be senior citizens, maybe something for their grandkids, education for their great-grandkids. If you live to be 95, you may have some great-grandkids. This really isn't going to leave an estate there. If you have a house that you're living in that's paid off, maybe that will be the estate. It'll get paid off, and then that'll be it. But this is not really going to leave much. So what if you left this in stocks? All right, so I am going to get rid of ROI rate here and talk about stress testing your retirement plan. All right, so if I go to the history of S&P 500, these are the returns from 1988 to 2016. All right, so if I look at these, the worst stretch out of all these is from 1999 to 2008. If you invested money in 1999, let's say you invested $1,000 in 1999 in the stock market, right? So, whoops, it didn't like that times. Okay. I'm just having all kinds of difficulty here. All right, there we go. So you invest this money in the stock market. And what would it have done if you invested over this period of time? Okay, so here's what would happen. It's really terrible. You would actually end up with less money when these 10 years are done than when it started. Okay, so this could happen when you retire. And again, investing at 4% got you all the way through retirement. You actually got to adjust the amount you withdrew by inflation, and you got all the way through, and you had a little tiny amount of money when you were done here, but it got you all the way through. All right, so this is what happens if you don't invest it at all and you just try and live off the principal, is that you run out of money completely at age 87. Not a bad deal if you die when you're 86, but you want to invest it in something. All right, the ROI rate. Okay, what we can do here, and when I talk about stress testing, is taking the worst returns over a time frame and then plugging those in and see how would we do. All right, so this is 1999 to 2008. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find like right about there maybe. That kind of worked. And you can see it's really bad because we ended up with less money. But now, if we go to the returns prior to 1998. All right, so these guys. Okay, and then I'm just going to sort these. In reverse order so that we get the chronology there. All right, so and I put these right here. Okay, so, and I'm just going to bump these up by 3 cells. Oops, it really didn't like that. Do it like this. Okay, and then let's duplicate the returns after that. So we stopped with the year 2008. There's been a few years after that, so 2009 and onward. And again, I'm just going to reverse sort these so that they match. Okay, so this is actually one of the worst periods of time for the stock market, and we're just going to go ahead and use the returns that we got there. All right, what happens if we actually throw in real-world data, including some of the most tumultuous time that we had in the stock market? Okay, this person actually retires. They keep withdrawing their money. but they retire with a ton of money, $3.5 million. I mean, their inflation adjusted total is $1.4 million. So, is the risk worth it? I think a lot of people would say the kids can lump it, but if you really wanted to leave something to your children, then if you leave it invested in stocks, I can't guarantee that the future is going to be like the past. We got all these bumps in the road here, but you can actually see an increase in the amount that you withdraw. Now, here's the other thing, is that we've got required minimum distributions, right? Required minimum distributions. And so what these are is the IRS says you have to take out a certain amount. So what I'm going to do is plug these in here. This is what the IRS says you have to take out of your retirement accounts. Okay, whoops, it didn't like that a bit. Let's paste the one more time. Copy you. Why do you not want to be copied? Okay, they're copied. Paste the values in there. Okay, so what you see here is if you take out just what the IRS requires you to take out, then the amount that you can take out actually kind of increases here. So what I'm going to do here is say that multiply it total times the required minimum distribution. Okay, so here's the other thing to consider, is that by leaving it invested in stocks, as bumpy as it is, like here it was so bad that the amount you withdrew actually went down, but the amount that you're taking out is monumentally better, right? So you are just taking out tons more money, instead of taking out in this year 43,000, you're taking out 120,000 when you're 87. I mean, well, what are you going to do with 120,000 when you're 87? I don't know. Maybe you want a really nice nursing home, or maybe you're still active and you're out there running around and you're doing great. Just realize this road gets bumpy. These amounts don't always go up. Like here, we went from being able to take out $146,000 when you're 89 to having to only take out $84,000 when you're 90. Based on required minimum distributions. So staying invested in stocks, even applying real world rates of return in here that actually happen throughout history, you do much better. Okay, what if the world just changes so much that it's going to be different? So what I'm going to say here is let's take these rates, these real world rates, and let's make a change here. I'm going to go ahead and insert a column and say bad rates. And these are the real world rates minus 2%. Okay, so instead of 16% return, it's 14% return. Again, there's a way to stress test it. It's like you don't know necessarily that things are going to be this way. All right, so ROI now is going to be the total times the bad rate. All right, so that's instead of E8, it's going to be F8 up here. Okay, and then I copy this down. All right, so we still have money here at the end, so that's actually really good. So even if the stock market returns yields that are 2% less than what we got during this time period on average, then you're still going to do really well. So again, here your Social Security benefit would have been $55,000. You do a $97,000. Are there any years where you would take out less money? Well, here at age 70, yeah. So, a little bit less here. But what we could do is just say that in these early years, we'll just set this thing at $35,000. Or actually, we can just set a withdrawal rate of 5%. That it's always 5% or more. All right, so you still have money here at the end, and you've still taken out more money. So here in this year, it's a little bumpy. Let's take out 6% in our first year. All right, so again, still have money at the end. Took out monumentally more money as we went along. All right, so is there an argument to be made for leaving this stuff invested in stocks even during your retirement? Yeah, it's risky. It could be just terrible. I mean, nobody says that, the stock market has to return only 2% less. It could return 4% less. And then what happens? Well, let's find out. It's probably not going to be pretty. Okay, at this point, I don't know, you're still doing fine. I mean, you've still got money left over at the end. You still, although the return that you're getting is less though. Um, it's just you're just gonna have to watch it and decide what level of risk is appropriate for you. So like here, when you're 90 years old, you're actually gonna get a little bit less than what you would have gotten the other way. But you can always say that it's this or this, depending on which one's greater. So, and again, you do have money left over. You've got like $500,000 or almost $200,000 inflation adjusted at the end of your life to give away, or as a cushion if you end up living to be older than 95. So, and again, this is presuming that the stock market from here on out or when you retire returns 4% less than it did during the period from the 80s through the 90s and the 20s and the 2000s and 2010s. So that's about it. I mean, it's not totally hopeless. Depending on your tolerance for risk, which granted, as you're older, your tolerance should be much lower. You want this ROI rate to be something that guarantees that you're going to get into retirement pretty well. But if you keep it invested in stocks, even if you don't presume the smooth 10%, and you put in real world data from actual rates of return over a specific period of time, then you still do pretty well. So it's not completely hopeless if you decide to retire at age 50. It's just harder. You probably have to work until you're 70 instead of working until you're 67, and the amounts of money that you're talking about are smaller. So it just depends on your tolerance for risk. And that's it.